public procurement projects, stuff like that. Those people, they don't need the money. But because they have the opportunity to amass wealth, they go in for the grand corruption. The unfortunate part of it, for me, is that those people, even when they get those ill-gotten wealth, instead of even investing it in the country so that ordinary people can even get something to do, they siphon off this money to abroad and leave the money there. Sometimes they don't even finish spending them before they die off. And these monies are kept outside the confines of our country, or Africa for that matter. And these guys will give us loans using our own money that they have taken over the years because our leaders have kept these monies there. We have a lot of cases like that. So that, for me, is an issue. And that is what we are confronted with. You know, everybody come to, whether you are in Africa here or outside, anybody who have any political party that want to win election in Africa, you just use this slogan: when you come, you fight corruption. People will vote for you because they know how dire and debilitating that corruption hurts our country and our development. In fact, for me, corruption is a crime against humanity, because if you don't have health posts, hospital, bad roads in your community, the reason is that somebody is siphoning off all this money that's supposed to help make life better. Every government, your first responsibility is to assure the country of their basic necessity: food, shelter, clothing, and roads. That's it. If you can, any government can do this, you have fulfilled your requirement on the social contract. So for me, corruption it kills. You have heard buildings collapsing because the planners will give permission to bad structures. We have medicine, drugs coming into our country because those authorities will allow drugs, fake drugs, to come in because of corruption. And it's something that it is hurting. Corruption, if you are not careful, it perpetuates poverty. It creates state capture. So people outside will be controlling government because they are the financiers. And these guys are not probably the best. So we need to be serious about corruption if really we want to make progress. In fact, the UN says the Millennium Development Goals, the amount of money we lose through corruption is the same amount that we need to implement all the goals, including education, health, the social needs. So why shouldn't we talk about corruption? Because if we don't, it will ruin our country, it will bring underdevelopment and die poverty.
I mean, I've picked such interesting points from what Prof said, that the amount of money we lose through corruption is the same amount of money we need to develop. And that's quite worrying, isn't it, from an economic point of view, Peter?
Of course, very, very worrying. And that is what is causing a lot of economies to be falling apart. But in dealing with corruption, we have to deal with from two main levels: the childhood level and then the adult level. And the reason why it's very important to deal with it from these two important levels is that at the childhood level, the child goes to school or lives with parents or guardians, and they live to see the kind of things that happens. And if you teach the child the right way to live, and he grows with it, then you have a generation of people who will become very addicted to ethical ways of doing things. And that is why you go to a certain home and you realize that everything is in order. You go to a certain school and realize that the kind of ethics being taught in the school is having effect on the pupils or the children. And so if you don't inculcate the right values, the right principles, and the right ideals in them, and they grow to the adult level, then that is where, at that stage, you need leadership to handle it. And so if the child understands that even going to school late is a form of corruption, if he understands that if you give him or her assignment, he does not do it or doesn't do it, and it's a form of corruption, if you tell him that if you are caught in an examination or you don't cheat, if basic principles, ethics, that will enable people live right, when you put that in a child and he grows with it, even when he is forced to do the wrong thing, because he is intoxicated with these values, it helps him to correct the wrongs of society.
So it's a Bible principle: train up a child in the way he should go, and when he grows, he won't depart from it. Is that what you're saying?
I have a practical example of that.
Very
Okay.
good. Very good.
Finish your point, and then Prof will take that example that you talk about. We are talking about ways of dealing with corruption because it's become a canker in recent times. What have been your experiences? The Prof has told us about the 3 basic ways in which we can be corrupt. He talked about petty corruption, he's talked about bureaucratic corruption, and he's talked about grand corruption. So petty corruption, you pay little tips and bribes here just to, get your work done. Bureaucratic corruption, people in offices are asking, or they stall in delivering services to you because they are expecting you to give some monies before they can provide those services. Chances are they are even being paid to provide those services for you, but they still implement all manner of ways to ensure that you have to drop something before they fulfill that for you. Grand corruption, he's explained to us about persons in positions of influence using that position of influence to amass wealth for themselves, and in most cases he's told us that they usually invest these funds abroad until they pass on, and sometimes the monies are not even accessible by their families. What has been your experiences with corruption? 05555610034. Send your comments and contributions to us now. I'll go to the board and read them shortly. So Peter,
yes,
you're saying that it begins from childhood. So what we are seeing now is primarily because we've not raised the right caliber of children who have now grown to become corrupt adults.
Yes, it's partly that. Okay. And it's because we have not intentionally dealt with it at the level that we should. So from the primary to the junior high to the senior high to the university level, if you look at the entire curricula, we have not intentionally built in this such that whilst the person is living out of school, he has some level of mentality about how to handle issues of ethical values. So that when the person grows and he gets into the corporate world, each organization has its own standard operating procedure. So if they say that if you come to work, reporting to work is 8, and you come to work at 8:1, and when you are penalized for that, you won't see it to be wickedness because you have already been imbibed with certain values and ideals, such that you know that it is not a punishment, but it's about living right. So that if you have been told that you have flouted certain policies of the organization, and there's a committee set up or something has been done there, then you are penalized for it, you will not see it as wickedness or a punishment or somebody hating you, but it is because this is what we have set up our minds to do, and when I'm wrong, I have to face it. And so that's why I'm talking about handling it from that level, because at the adult level, you can only handle it by leadership. And what I say leadership means that you must live by example, because at the end of the day, you have principles, because it's laws that deals with corruption. And in this country, we have more than enough laws to handle it, more than enough institutions to handle it. But the lack of that is this: when people are being dealt with, or when people are being prosecuted, or when people are being asked to do the right thing, we see it as witch hunt. We see it as political opponent trying to put people in a bad light. But if you have values where you have been inculcated with these ideals and principles, then no matter the circumstance, you will not see it as a punishment. So that if today the head of GBC says that everybody who doesn't report to work at 8, you are going to be punished at this level, you don't see it as a leader who is wicked or who you want to find out some people and find fault with them. But you see that this is a principle that I have been trained with and I live by it. It is only when we refine our minds in this nature that will enable us to live right. When it happens like that, the leader will even be afraid to do the wrong thing, because he knows that because corruption
The
involves two
standards have
people.
been set so high.
Exactly, because it involves two people. Because no one person can be involved in it.
So, because you raised the issue about two people, who is to blame? And Prof, I'll come to you for that example that you have for us. Who is to blame for this in an instance of corruption? Is it the one who gives or the one who takes? Is it the chicken or the egg?
This one, so far as two people are involved in doing the wrong thing, both of them are to be blamed. But you see, there are circumstances that push people into that, and sometimes people go into it, and you say that, but why should you? Recently, somebody, stole some chicken from one institution and one restaurant, and then when he is punished for it, I heard somebody saying that, why do you punish him for stealing chicken? Because he's hungry. But you see, if there are proper ideals and values in that person, he will know that it doesn't matter whether you are hungry or not. It is wrong to do that.
Right. Prof, so has our society been set up to encourage corruption to thrive? I'm asking this on the heels of what Peter just said now about sometimes even empathizing with people who do wrong. If someone comes to work late, oh, there was traffic, today it rained, there was floods in my area, the car broke down, I had to take the children to school. We come up with all manner of reasons. They may be valid and they may be very important reasons, but does it encourage, do those things encourage people to further perpetrate acts of corruption?
I'm laughing because it is true that you may have a very good reason why you want to dabble in corruption or things that are not worthy of pursuing. See, the same Africans, the same Ghanaians, we go outside and there we have snow, but you are punctual there. Here, it drizzles in July and everybody is late. The same person. That means there's something wrong with our system. Why is that side? It's snowing, raining, or storming, you will still get to work on time. But in Ghana here, it drizzles, or whatever reasons, you are getting to work. You're getting to work around 11 instead of being at 8:30. But I just wanted to make a point about, getting it right. Because somebody will say you can't teach the old dogs new tricks. You just have to punish it. But for the children, in my work, I go around a lot. I saw something in the Scandinavian. They are the least corrupt countries around the world. I went to deliver a program there, but my hotel to the conference facility, I have to pass through a primary school or something like that, and I heard them reciting something every now and then, the same thing. I was there for 2 weeks, and almost every time I hear about that. So I asked my Norwegian colleague, what is going on here? He said, here is a policy for the children to be reciting certain poem. I said, what was it? He said, well, the teacher comes to the class every morning. Before the class starts, the teacher will call class. They say, yes, teacher. Then the teacher will say, if it is not yours, then the children will respond, don't take it. Then the class will begin. Break time. If it's not yours, don't take it. The children will respond, break. Closing. If it's not yours, then the children will respond, don't take it. They will be reciting this for 10 times in a day. How many times in a week? For how many times in a year? And for the whole 6 years. So the point I was making, by the time they finish primary school,
It's been indoctrinated
that if it is not yours, don't take it. At that point, I stood and I was reflecting. When I was like them, in my country, what rhymes were they teaching us? Something that they taught us as that now, I can't make a heck of it. Blah, 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 sheep, have you any wool? Yes, and then we all... It didn't make any sense. It didn't show us any uprightness. That's why we are not inculcating. So I think that our Ministry of Education, curriculum development for primary school, they should look into our society and get certain simple messaging to bombard the children in the primary creche. By the time they get to secondary school, they are a changed person. Because you see, children, look at home. Any popular advert that comes on the television, as soon as it happens, you see the children will be reciting against it. Because that's how children learn. You bombard them with the same messaging constantly. It will imbibe and inculcate in them, and it will be with them. So these children go home and they ask their mom, their dad, oh, but it's not yours, why are you taking it? And they feel bad. And that's why the Scandinavians, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, they are always leading the least corrupt country in the world. You catch them young and you give them the right messaging, and it will stick with them forever. So that is the message I wanted to add.
Interesting thoughts, dealing with corruption bottom up. So from the early years into the latter years, the public believes that it would make a big impact. Share your thoughts with us. What has been your experience with institutions, personalities whom you have encountered who have acted in a way that you deem inappropriate when it comes to corruption? So I'll put this to you, Peter. The institutions are there. Like you said, there is an insatiable appetite for more. But there are many laws that have been implemented. Are they having the required effect? And are we making headway in our fight against corruption?
Yes. In fact, we have not made the headway that we should be proud of ourselves. Because we have now moved away from the theory and the talking and the presentation on corruption to now action, where we will see it being practicalized. Other than that, we will always be making fine presentations. We will always be referring to, this is what the law says, this is what it is, this is what must be done. But if nothing is done, we can't.
But the law makes it possible for certain institutions to perform certain roles. It means that the Office of the Special Prosecutor has a lot to do by virtue of the law that puts it in place. It means that the Public Accounts Committee has a lot to do. It means that the Attorney General, which brings out a report, yearly or twice a year or whatever, has the responsibility because it's been given the mandates by law to do them. You think that it's not being done or it's not enough?
Yes, the institutions are there, but the capacity to enable them do those things are not there. Let me give you a typical example. As a media organization, you will bear with me that there are certain corrupt activities or acts in the past that you keep hammering them, talking about them day in, day out, and nobody responds to it. It has to take somebody at a certain level, you see, at the middle class, where people can speak out. Even at that level, we have classes where it has to take somebody to put something out there to draw our attention for certain things to be corrected. And so you realize that people get tired, people get fed up to say that, well, if I keep saying this and nobody, acts on it, then it enables those who are doing the wrong thing, the capacity or the courage to do more. That is why these institutions have to go beyond the extra mile by ensuring that whatever is reported, whatever is seen, they do it without any selection. So you see that anytime the special prosecutor or anytime there is a court case that involves a politician, that is where you see a certain level of support telling society that what this person is going through is wrong because they deliberately want to tarnish his image. When it happens like that, everybody who is watching sees that institution to be corrupt already. So the trust, the faith we have in that institution then goes bad. So what I'm trying to arrive at is that for us to enable this institution work, governance, leadership must give them all the required independence to be able to prosecute all these corrupt acts. Other than that, we will only be seeing them as favoring one when he's in opposition and against the other when he's in government, because we think that we only prosecute cases that are against us, and those that are in favor of us, we try to put them aside.
Right. Prof, so our leaders tell us especially before they get into positions of power, that they have this anathema towards corruption. But then people come into power and the perception is that they soften that stance a little bit. So I'll ask you the question, is politics slagging our fight against corruption?
Yeah, obviously. Obviously, politics at all levels. Because the way our politicking is, which has been monetized to a large extent, you need to have money to execute your campaign or prosecute your campaign. And for that matter, your salary is not going to be enough. So somebody has to sponsor you. And therefore, that person sponsoring, we don't know the sources of the money. And therefore, you have to make sure that you pay back at all levels, from the parliamentary to the national levels. So yes, politics and corruption coexist. In fact, in some jurisdiction, people in authorities are a product of corruption. So you cannot deal with corruption without looking at the politicking part of it. But you see, the challenge here is this. I made that point that we are all prone to corruption. The only difference between countries that are doing well in fighting corruption and those that are not doing well is your institutions. You were talking about the institutions. The institutions have to be strong. The institutions, you're talking about independent. I think Ghana, the institutions are largely independent. Well, what they don't have is the adequate resources. You see, I realize that every government comes in, they struggle to fight corruption. So they add a layer of administrative structure on it. So we have SHRAJ, which is a constitutional product. Then we have YOCO, who is an act of parliament. Then we have the special prosecutor, which is an act of parliament. They all emphasize or focus on different aspects of corruption, like YOCO, organized crime, SHRAJ, human rights and corruption and investigation, and Office of the Special Prosecutor. Look at the name, prosecution. So for me, first and foremost, these three organs have to have a very strong MOU to work together, because they will support each other if they come together instead of having a silo approach of standing alone and doing their own things. The institutions have to be strong, because if the institutions are not strong in terms of allocation of resources, then they are not capable enough to withstand those who are corrupt, who have much more resources. Of course, they have stolen wealth. So they can really run down the institutions. But it's important to note that when you are dealing with corruption, as I see it in our country now, corruption is so much pervasive. It's everywhere. You see it on the street. You see it at the boardrooms. And you see it at the very high places. It's everywhere. You see, as at now, if you like, let's remove all the senior civil servants and everybody on the top there and bring brand new Ghanaians and see whether you solve corruption. You're not going to solve corruption, because these people who we are accusing of being corrupt are not coming from the moon. They are the Ghanaians. They are those who went to primary school, secondary school, universities.
So the idea that corruption is for a certain group of people, you think it's not true?
It's for all of us. All of us are. You go and buy things, and you work you say no, dear child, that kind of stuff. Everybody is trying to be corrupt, or we are all. Because on the street, people are, making connection with them. That's corruption. In the marketplace, there's a social cancer. Corruption has been known as a cancer. We need to take a surgical approach. We cannot continue to behave the way we behave and solve corruption in our country. It won't happen. We have to do it differently, because let's face it, you cannot repeat the same old things and expect new results. But the way we are going, if we are not careful, our country will get to a point where salvaging it will be a problem. So we have to do something about it.
should we not focus on tackling the bureaucratic processes that make corruption such a relevant thing to have?
Yes.
And I say that to mean that if someone wants to do business with GBC and the person does not have any hindrances in the course of that business, chances are they wouldn't pay person A, B, or C to make that business possible. But if going to access any service at a company would mean spending a week or two doing a lot of back and forth, and there is a way for me to save some precious hours so that I won't be late for work, like Peter said, and arrive 8:01, and I won't leave work early and I actually stay until 5, then just fix the institutional problems so that I am not compelled to cut the corners to make things happen for me. How about that, Peter?
Yeah, where we have gotten to now, the only way we can reduce, because we can't entirely wipe it away, is to deal with it from the bottom level. Because at the top level, it's very difficult because the institutions themselves are not strong enough to handle it. And it is a variety of issues. You remember we have Whistleblowers Act. But you recall that almost everybody who attempted to blow the whistle blew all of them away. And so it becomes, an issue of, then let me sit in my corner and watch them do the wrong thing, instead of me going to say it and then I'll become a target. And so maybe what we have to do is at the upper level, because at the lower level, we can only tackle it from the mind. And we can tackle it from the mind by the doctrination, by the values, as I said, that we inculcate in them. That will help them grow with it. And that will gradually help us to solve it at a certain level. But at the upper level, then we need to look at it on case-by-case basis, institution by institution. And maybe we need to ask every institution or the head or the leadership of that institution to present maybe anti-corruption plan. So that you present it and let's see, okay, these are the things that are happening in my institution. So, for instance, if you go to Registrar General Department, for instance, and you want to register an organization, the processes that you go through, they all knew the challenges that are there. And if you go to DVLA, for instance, they all know the challenges that are there. So let each institution present their own plan of how to deal with this. And maybe probably we look at how to monitor and how to ensure that there is compliance, so that if I go and then there's a challenge, there can be an institution where I can complain. Maybe if you can have maybe a corporate corruption bureau or something where all these institutions that have this anti-corruption plan are filed there, so that when there is something wrong, you are able to report and they are able to tackle it correctly. Because now there is one thing, identify even the bad practice, and even being able to report it at the right channel, because you can get to a certain level and you'll be blocked. And so how then do you voice it out? If you don't know anybody, either in the media space, to call and say, this is what is happening, for them to bring it out, you are at the bottom and it will happen and nothing will be done about it. So we need to be intentional in dealing with it at a corporate level, where maybe each corporate institution, whether the state institution or whether the private institution, they have to present a plan. You see, if you look at, for instance, what happened in the banking sector, where a lot of the banks will have to fold up, it's because of some of these things. And the people, they knew what was going on. But unfortunately, some of them have to sit down without voicing it out, because he or she is afraid that if my boss is doing something which is wrong, who am I to go and tell him or her? You are afraid because you'll be victimized. But if you know that there is, and every organization has, maybe a point where you can report such things without being noticed, and it will be dealt with. And when it's not dealt with, you have another higher institution where you can report and they'll deal with it. I can tell you that it will help to reduce some of these things. Other than that, we will talk about it. But at the upper level, it can never be so. Because like Prof was saying, anytime the politician is coming to power, everybody is happy and ready for a change. The trust is there. By the time they spend 4 years and maybe the second term, everybody is in a hurry to kick them out. Why? Because when they were coming, the message they presented, by which people had the trust in them, when they enter, their actions were completely the opposite. And they would defend it to the latter. It's so mind-boggling how the same thing that they spoke about when they were in opposition, and talking of both sides, they come to power, the same thing is being done, and when you ask them, they want to defend it, and they want to tell you that, yes, as for us, it's for a different reason. And you ask yourself, so then how do you expect the people who are listening, who are there, to think that these people are really ready to do something right? It is only when there are measures or there are institutions to deal with it at a level beyond them.
Prof, are these suggestions that you think are feasible, because you have the benefits of experience from the Commonwealth Secretariat, that if we encourage organizations to set up these anti-corruption units, and then people know what to look out for and where to report it, then we could make some headway? Because it's pretty much, we've had laws against corruption for a long time, but actually implementing those laws is proving to be, we are at the very, very early stages. We're very inchoate at the minute. So are some of these suggestions real? What Peter is talking about, are they realistic?
Oh yeah, they're very real. In fact, in my work, that's what I do. I advise government around the Commonwealth, about 56 of them. And that is one of the things that we do. That, you see, the anti-corruption agency cannot be everywhere in every ministry, department, or agencies. So what we advocate is that we should set up anti-corruption units in every ministry, department, and agency. And the head of each of the ministries, so here like the chief director, will be the principal chief anti-corruption officer. Because under your watch, if corruption happens, you are there, and under your watch, if corruption happens, you will be held accountable. In fact, that's what Singapore is doing. Singapore, the head of each ministry, department, and agency is responsible for whatever happened under your watch. You cannot escape punishment. So when you set up anti-corruption units in each of these institutions, then they will be the watchdog. They will give you the early warning signal to the anti-corruption agencies that, oh, look, there's something happening. So please put your searchlight on this. And that in itself will deter a lot of people from being corrupt in the administration, in the bureaucracy. But then there's other important, what I call policy issues that we have to look at later on. Thank you.
Right, so we are on our screen now, and we'll be taking some of your comments to us. Thank you for sending them. Our WhatsApp number 05555610034. These are the thoughts of those who are sharing them, and not the thoughts of GBC. So, first one on my screen, corruption in Ghana, I don't think it will stop just because our leaders who are leading us are the most corrupted in the country. Who watches the watchman? In fact, I have a shop in Ashama Municipal, which I paid 60 Ghana cedis every year as a revenue to the assembly. But last year, it was raised to 350 Ghana cedis. When I asked about it, they told me it's order from above, which is part of corruption. The same thing happened to me this year too. When I wanted to renew my license, instead of 170, the man told me it was 380, and I was confused. So I had to leave his office to Accra Ministry to do it at the fee of 170 cedis. So I see it in this manner, that it's the leadership which are training the youth to become rich quick through corruption. You didn't add your name, but thank you for sending that message to us. Good morning. Francis is speaking here. This thing called corruption is with us in our churches, mosques, everywhere. It's all mindset, because we are not doing the right things. To do away with corruption, it needs to start from our schools, churches, mosques, and open places to do things right and also allow the law to work. Francis Zuta sent us that from Kaswa. Okay, talking about politics, which is not on the table right now. Good morning, and thanks to your panelists. Simon from Rioso, in categorizing corruption, I wanted to hear religious corruption, but that was left out. I say this because today many are being deceived by false prophets and false pastors, etc., all in the name of Jesus. This is, I think, is damaging and must not be left out. Thanks. Thank you, viewer, for sending that to us. Israel says, please, it's very true. I'm at home now because of this corruption. We did a contract, and to the end, Another money came from the donors for the management to get huge profits, and rumors are all over. So it ended on the fixed date, which can be renewed. But because of that, the donors said no. So they don't want to mention names, which is very, very good indeed. This is the one I just read in the beginning. Good morning. Parents have a lot to do in this fight. I'm sure this is in support of Peter's call for training them from the bottom up. Before the kids start formal school, they are already taught informally at home. My 3-year-old girl will tell her elder siblings when they are playing, "Mom said no lies and no mischief in this house and anywhere." She heard me say that to the older siblings, and she has started picking on it. Even my 6-month-old girl is learning to act like her siblings because of the frequent way they react to certain adverts on the TV. So yes, it had to start at home, then in schools. Salma, thank you for that message. My child attends a certain SHS, and in that school, some of the children steal each other's school uniforms and other things, not thinking about the harm they cause to the other, though they stay in the same dormitory and live in the same school. So the question I continually ask myself is, what will these children become when they reach higher institutions and even when they begin to work? So suggestions that it starts early, quite popular on the screen. Good morning, GTV Breakfast. I'm enjoying the discussion on corruption. I like your panel discussion on the topic, especially Professor Roger Kranting. I want to ask, is money the only form of corruption? What about receiving gifts of any kind, like houses, also favors, getting jobs, sponsorships, scholarships, offering sex, especially in the tertiary school, exchanging sex for grades, etc.? It is pathetic listening to the panelists. We are all corrupt one way or the other. If we teach morals in school from basic to tertiary, it will make impacts in reducing corruption in our country. I think we all need to get the books, The Ethics for Boys and Girls. Great discussion. Let it keep up. But we all need to change as we are all involved. Molly sent us that message. Molly Ankra, thank you so much. Thelma, everything about us, that's a screaming message from Fred. Everything about us in this country is sickening, from those in authority to the last. Whatever we are now, that's how our children will grow to be. Food for thought. That's quite a deep one there. Good morning, Thelma. I think sometimes bureaucratic bottlenecks within state institutions very much give rise to low-level corruption. In 2020, I tried to register for the Ghana card and visited the center on a couple of instances, but the crowd was too large and disorganized. I was told I could pay a bribe to facilitate the process, and I was ready to do that. Finally, I just decided to abandon the exercise. I obtained the card later with ease and without a queue. Full decentralization is the answer. So we cannot independently verify whether or not this claim of somebody asking for a bribe at the Ghana card office is true. This is the story as presented us by the person who sent us that message. So decentralization is the answer. I'll come to my panel and see what they say about that. What is a gift, and what type of gift should a public servant accept? Also, what is palm greasing or extortion? So all these things, these words coming up because it's a corruption conversation. I think grand corruption should be eradicated first before any other type. But here we are as Africans faced with poor leadership, lacking intensive checks on state officials. So I think we should just focus on the functionalist view and go by its principles. Alex sent us this from Sunyani using the hashtag I absolutely love GTV Breakfast. So somebody thinks, well, leave the bottom folks alone and tackle it from the top so that we figure it out. Ghana youth are embracing this internet fraud locally and internationally, and it's really eating deep to the extent that youth have no values for hard work and education anymore. I hear this a lot, that our sense of values and appreciation for hard work and remaining steady and true to the cause and waiting for the thing to, mature and then begin to give us fruit is eroding in our society. Here's a Nera Live from Kaswa using hashtag GTV. Hi, now I think the best strategic ways of fighting corruption is to put much focus on digitization agenda. If using Ghana card alone can expose 14,000 ghost names from NSS, then I think is the best way of fighting corruption. So many of you are still sending us messages on our screens. I so appreciate. Corruption has always been the order of the day, from the least to the highest. The most practical and lasting solution to the problem of endemic political corruption with impunity in this country is open declaration of assets, as opposed to the current secret declaration of assets as is done in US, in Nigeria. The voters should demand for a referendum where we should have open declaration of assets or not. Could that also work, an open declaration? So we know what you had when you came in and what you had maybe when you're going out. But how does that deal with the issue of registering, you know, homes and property under other people's names? I'm not quite sure. I'll come to you, gentlemen, about that. So many names on the screen. Nelson from Kofodia, security guards in most technical universities, especially he's mentioning one particular, are coerced into working for 12 hours. So he's saying he's been victimized because of that situation. We'll get into it. I personally believe that the receiver is to be blamed. If you don't ask for it, I wouldn't give it out. It's so sad that if you don't give it out, you won't get a job. Africa. This is what a viewer has sent us. Good work done, Christian is saying from Medina. Okay, talking politics, we have not mentioned that here. Robert from Adenta thinks some of our state institutions are forcing individuals to become corrupt. Example, he's mentioning the passport office and they're saying he's alleging that they will not print out your passport booklet and they'll tell you they have a shortage of booklets. But when you pay through the back door, the booklet will be made available for a year now and still waiting. That is Robert's allegation from Adenta, which as we stand here now, we are not independently able to verify. GRA should be in the forefront of fighting corruption. A simple audit of the wealth of people can disclose all this. We love to talk than act. Therefore, nothing will change. So talking plenty, but very little action. Thank you for sending all your messages across to us. Gentlemen, you've heard what our people on the screens are saying. Some are also offering other solutions. Declaration of assets, open declaration, if some are saying. Where should all this take us? And as we wrap up, what should be our most immediate steps if we are not happy with where we are now in our fight against corruption? I'll start with Prof.
Okay, thank you. Let me give you my 4 key proposal for dealing with corruption in this country, if we can do it. I've done it in other countries, it's worked, but it takes a lot of political will, bureaucratic will, institutional will. The churches, the mosque, the opinion leaders all have to chip in to change course, because if you don't, we're not going to get to where we want. The first proposal I'll give, and that person make a right point, that's on my number 1 list. All political parties coming to elections should take note of this, and if they can implement it, it will deal with corruption. So the first strategy, policy proposal is assets declaration. The assets declaration regime we have now is not helping to fight corruption at all. So the proposal is that before you enter into any responsible position, you have to declare your assets. After your tenure, importantly, you also have to declare your assets so that we know what you had, and when you completed your tenure, what you have added on. But not to keep it secret. It should be publicly verifiable. It should be either on a website or somewhere that everybody can know. Now, this idea that you don't want people to know your asset, then don't go into public service. Because once you go into public service, you are a public officer, and the public have to know. So we should make the assets declaration verifiable by public, so that we know whether you are hiding something or not. We need to change the way we do things, because we are in a very critical situation, and we can't go on to do the same old things. We're not going to get anywhere with that. So we should be able to do a little radical things. Number 2, another policy proposal, lifestyle audit. Lifestyle audit is where the anti-corruption agencies are empowered practically to assess every public officer, your lifestyle, and see it links with the assets declaration. Your salary is so much. Within 2 years, you have acquired buildings, assets, vehicles, whatever. We should be able to match.
So to verify if they can afford the life.
Exactly, because your lifestyle audit will indicate that you are living beyond your means. Your salary shouldn't be enable you to acquire those assets within that period. And that is a lifestyle audit. We should be able to empower our institutions. I think Office of the Special Prosecution has that. But we should implement them. Every public official, every political office holder, we should check their lifestyle audit. Number 2, because that will then mean that if you acquire illicit wealth, it will be taken away from you. So there's no point going into public office. But now, because you go into public office, you can acquire all this illicit wealth and you can take away with it. Nobody question. So they keep going there.
Okay.
Number 3, another policy decision that we have to take is what we call beneficial ownership register. The beneficial ownership register, the law empowers everybody to declare who is the actual benefit instead of getting people to front, registering companies and others' assets name in children and relatives and friends, fronting. That law is like how we have in the banking sector, know your customer, KYC. It's a law that is applicable in most jurisdictions who are dealing with corruption. Beneficial owner, we will get to know who is the actual owner, so that you don't put people as a front, fronting for you to hide or conceal your ill-gotten wealth. We should do that. And finally, that is a little controversial, but even in UK we have them. Even in the Scandinavian, in Australia, in other places we have them. Reverse the burden of proof when it comes to corruption cases. You see, when you reverse the burden of proof, because we know by law, common law says that you are not guilty until you got proving you guilty. But in corruption cases, because everything is concealed, the only thing we see as a process of crime is the physical that we see, the physical things that we see, tangible things that we see. So once we notice that you have acquired all this wealth, go to court. They should take you to court to explain to the court how you acquire this. Otherwise, you are guilty of it. How you acquire all these assets based on your salary and your income. We want to know your liability. We want to know your assets. We want to know everything. Investment. So that the court will know. So that's why we call it the reverse burden of proof.
Okay. So
you are guilty until you prove that this assets it was acquired legitimately.
Right.
Now, if we can do all this, corruption will come down. Those who run into politics because they want to make wealth, it will be taken away from them, and we will have a better development agenda.
Peter, your last words. How do we do this?
Let's gather the courage to be tough on ourselves. And when we are tough on ourselves, we can correct the wrongs. That's it.
Gather the courage to be tough on ourselves. And when we gather the courage, we can get it right. That's the final remarks from our panel. Peter Sekpe giving us those last words, the policy analyst who sat with us for this conversation. Also, Professor Roger Opon-Kranting, Head, Public Sector Governance at the Commonwealth Secretariat, sharing his 4 key tips on dealing with corruption: asset declaration, lifestyle audit, beneficial ownership register, and to reverse the burden of proof on persons who are found to have unexplained wealth. An unending conversation by all means when it comes to corruption, but hopefully we've learned little pockets of wisdom and information that we can apply in our lives so that we can all do better, so that we can all serve our country better. This is Breakfast on GTV. I'm Thelma Taki. We'll be back after the break.